Welcome to week 80 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
Last night we watched another episode of Lou Grant, and they've been a good treasure trove of Santa Barbara appearances. Amy Perkins, Carrie Sherman was on.
And she was playing a woman in a halfway house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting to me that I think the two times we've seen Amy in other things so far, she's been a criminal. It was this episode, as I say, in a halfway house, and we saw her a few years back on Barnaby Jones playing a female gang member.
Mm-hmm.
So very interesting that she was really cast in a completely opposite character for Santa Barbara.
I did a quick scan of IMDb after we saw her last night, and she seems to have a couple of dozen credits before Santa Barbara, but I think only one after, so she must have retired. This week's hat is Brenda Mines, where my dad worked for many years before they ran out of copper and molybdenum. We finished episode 385, which originally aired Monday, February 3rd, 1986. So we're in February, and this is the sweeps. So I think this casino stuff is going to be related to the sweep storylines. Kirk breaks into Gina's room and searches for his $500 while she's taking a bath. She tells him she spent it because she knew he'd want it back. So he finds the dresses that she bought and tears them up. Kirk tells Gina that she won't be allowed in at the casino opening, which she had expressed an interest in going to. He says, "You've got a permanent seat on the outside looking in." But I think Gina might show up anyway. What do you think?
I think she will, and it does occur to me as well that Kirk could have actually gotten his money back if he had not torn up Gina's dresses and had just returned them to the store.
Cruz shows up and asks Gina why she's spending so much time with Kirk. Cruz brings a drunken Nick to the beach house, and Nick tells Cruz he thinks Dylan and Kelly are lovers, which Cruz isn't quite buying, but Cruz also mentions to him that Cece and Eden would freak out if they knew how much time Kirk was spending with Gina. So he's got something ruminating in his head with this Kirk-Gina combination, enough so that he'll tell Nick about it.
Ironically, I kind of think CC would be more upset than Eden.
Yeah. Lieutenant Rossmore, who was, of course, the person on the case of the attempted murder of Cece Capwell, tries to interrogate Cece a little bit about that night, but Cece says he'll handle things himself. So Rossmore's being thwarted. He and Captain De Niro visit Cruz, and they suspect him of hiding evidence. Then Rossmore threatens Pearl with a perjury charge over the alibi that he gave Eden. So Cruz and Pearl go to the bus station to retrieve that hidden evidence, and Cruz is about to burn the dress when he realizes something that he learned in police school, that the evidence holds the clues, and this dress must somehow provide a clue to what really happened to Cece. So he chooses not to burn it. So we had thought this dress might make an appearance.
I think I mentioned that. I was sort of hopeful. I was sort of feeling like it was wishful thinking at this point that it might make a reappearance, but looks like it is. I really don't have a lot of faith, though, in Cruz as a police officer if he was going to burn evidence.
Yeah, well, a dodgy character like Pearl is a witness. Not that the police seem to believe Pearl now, so maybe that's in Cruz's favor, that this confidence is in someone who won't be believed. Nick gives Ted a note to take to Kelly at the casino. Cece tells Kirk his primary objective is to get Lionel out of this casino. And Cece thinks Lionel might show up at that opening tonight. From Dylan's office, he watches Kelly on the casino floor via the security monitors. He assumes she told Nick, but she says she hasn't told him yet. Kelly's a bit surprised that he assumes that she'll be with Dylan as soon as she tells Nick. Dylan tells Kelly he loves her. Kelly says, I don't love you, I love Nick. Sam gets angry with Dylan when he tells Sam that after today he'll be with Kelly. Now, I don't know if you got any vibes from Dylan in this episode. That he might be somehow have gone over the edge a little bit in his sudden insistence that he's in love with Kelly and they might be together. I don't know. He seemed a bit frantic in the scene with Sam. So
I guess he did. I actually kind of tune out any scene with Dylan in them, so I have to admit I wasn't paying perhaps as close attention as I would have if the scene had Mason or another character in it. But certainly it would not surprise me if Dylan's next sort of evolution as a character is to go a bit nutty. I think it's been a while since we've seen Kelly Capwell in danger, so and since she's often endangered by lovers or former lovers, this would totally make sense. Having Nick rescue her would be a really good move, plot-wise. It would cement him as a hero, and it would really be a whole other level of drama in the whole brotherly sort of competition. Really, they're almost nemesis at this point. So I think that would be kind of, I wouldn't be surprised if the story went that way.
we will see if we're just reading too much into that one little scene or if this will escalate. Meanwhile, he's running a casino. Maybe he'll burn it down. I can't have Kelly. No, I can have this casino.
I feel like it's going down at some point.
Lionel tells Dylan to make sure Cece knows that he'll be there tonight. And then we see Lionel practicing with a deck of cards. Now I'm wondering if Lionel's somehow planning on cheating the casino. But then he owns half of it, so it wouldn't really be cheating himself too.
I was trying to remember if Lionel knows that Augusta's working there, and I was thinking maybe this would be a way for him to interact with her.
Okay. It just seemed kind of ominous, like, here's my master plan to get revenge on Cece. Hi. Playing with these cards.
I mean, it's very Lionel to be, so putting together card tricks. Slip a
marked deck into the pack. I think they'd be noticed if the backs are different, so I'm not sure. But yeah, he's got something planned, which is good. They haven't really had a confrontation since Cece came back to life. Augusta and Warren arrive at the casino to check things out before Augusta's shift. So the intention is that it's several hours before the opening. We see various people in their street clothes throughout this part of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And she refuses to take orders from Kelly Capwell, saying Dylan hired her, which Kelly is not too happy with. And then when she finds out that Lionel owns 40% of the casino, she quits. But Dylan tells her that as she's getting a divorce, she owns half of Lionel's possessions. Therefore, she owns 20% of the casino, so really she's just working for herself. And I think that talks her into staying. Then Warren jets out to the Capwell mansion to let Cece know that Lionel and Sophia are not coming to the opening together. But he ends up changing his mind and doesn't go in. But then Ted shows up anyway and tells Cece the same information. So, both Ted and Warren are zipping back and forth to this place 12 miles offshore. Now, I don't know how quick a boat is compared to a car.
Mm-hmm.
A quick 12-mile ride back and forth. It seems to be a lot. I'm going to pop over to the casino, then I'm going to pop home, then I'm going to pop back there later.
Did we ever check that 12 miles was the limit to international waters?
Oh, I think it is. I think it's well known. It's the the usual. There's a 200-mile limit for fishing, right? And 12 miles for the law. I think there's 2 miles for something else.
I gave the 200-mile one, I guess.
Brick arrives at the casino and tells Kelly that his feelings haven't changed towards her. So they seem to be, half siblings that are getting along. But he also says that his wife and son are his family now. So it doesn't seem like he's going to be trying to pursue any deeper relationship with the Capwells or Lockridges.
Not on a family level, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
He's not expecting invitations for Thanksgiving dinner or anything like that.
The casino opens. Suddenly, the whole cast is in tuxedos and dressed up. And the press is there. And Dylan shows them his solid gold dice that I guess he symbolically had made for the opening. I think somehow he's going to pocket some solid gold dice out of this press conference. Sam says that boats are pulling up outside, and it's like money pouring in. So I guess they must have put an ad in the paper. Come one, come all. Rich people to this casino opening. Kelly gets Dylan's note from Ted. Kelly gets Nick's note from Ted. And Dylan says... Kelly gets Nick's note from Ted and tells Dylan that she's going to tell Nick about Santa Rosa. Dylan tells Sam he's worried about what Nick will do if he finds out. Nick arrives and says to Kelly, "You have something to tell me, don't you?" So, in the midst of the grand opening with the press everywhere, it seems like Kelly's about to tell Nick that she slept with Dylan. I think the worst he can do is just storm off and get in the queue for one of the boats going back.
Yeah, and refuse to marry her again. So.
Mm-hmm. He already kind of did that, yeah. So it's not like it can get worse. So we'll see how Kelly reacts. We'll see how Dylan reacts. We'll see how Nick reacts on the next
episode. Or we
episode.
won't, because some of us may not be paying attention to a scene with Nick in it.
Nick or Dylan?
Sorry, Dylan.
Hard to pick between the two brothers, isn't it?
I'm just so bored with the whole storyline, honestly.
All right, well, February sweeps. Hopefully it'll come to an end. That is it for this episode. We'll be back after we watch the Tuesday episode number 386. See you then.
Gina, you haven't a prayer of getting into that party. From now on, you've got yourself a permanent reserved seat on the outside looking in. You've kept your figure.
Maybe you should take up voyeurism, Kirk. From what I hear, that's all Eden really allows you.
And just shut your filthy mouth.
Just because I was a child bride doesn't mean I'll be a childish divorcee.
Welcome back to episode 386 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara originally aired Tuesday, February 4th, 1986. 386. Hey, we never talked about the casino design. We have basically that one big room in the casino, I think, is where everything is going to be happening. It's got a few tables set up. And in the far right, back right, is a bar for people to hang out at. And we mentioned there's kind of an ornate curved entrance that people come through. But we didn't realize until this episode is that when they walk in, there's a little wall with an ornate metal grill that kind of has like a, I don't know what they call that shape, minaret shape or something. And that actually is the cashier's booth where Brick spent a good part of the episode hanging out behind. So that was more than just a little ornate alcove. That's actually the cashier's gate.
Yeah, it's quite a small space. It's not a big casino at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would assume maybe, I have no idea how oil rigs are generally laid out, but maybe this was the former mess hall or something like that. So,
and we have seen in previous episodes that outside of that main room, just to the right, there's a little other room that almost looks like a place where you'd have a little coffee maker if this was an office. But there were a lot of scenes going on there last time. It's not clear if this is an area where guests can come and go, or if this is a little staff staging area. But it's definitely an extra area where people can go and talk, away from others. But we've got the bar as well, as we'll see in this episode, where people can cluster around and not be heard by people who are at the gaming tables.
The one part of the casino that is actually quite spacious, much more spacious than I had actually anticipated, and we will visit it later in the episode, is Dylan's office.
Which is an oddly shaped room. It's strangely large. It's got lots of little corners and knickknacks and things hanging around. It's got 2 monitors on the wall to monitor security, but the door's in a weird spot, and I don't know.
It almost seemed to me more like what I would expect to see at the Capwell Hotel. And it made me wonder if maybe they just repurposed one of the sets from that era. So
Cruz and Pearl, I wonder what secrets the pink dress holds. So Cruz does not burn it. And then Cruz starts to talk a little bit about the alibi that Brandon gave for Gina. And says that he might want to question Brandon a little more about their night at the hotel. And Pearl says, what are you going to do, take away his candy or his marbles? And Kirk says, Cruz says, I'll take away your marbles if you still had them. Some wacky banter between Cruz and Pearl. Cruz tells Kirk that he knows about Gina and the whole plane ticket fiasco. Cece tells Kirk, after Cruz leaves, let's just hope that the best man wins. He is still needling Kirk about possibly losing Eden to Cruz. Rosa tells Cruz that Gina gave her the night off that night that Cece's plug was pulled. And Cruz does say he did kind of know that from, the reports, but now he's really maybe thinking about it a little more. All things he probably should have done months ago.
Yeah, and actually that sort of sums up, in a way, how I'm feeling right now about this storyline, is that I think it would have been, if it had taken place before Cece woke up, or maybe before we got so far even into the casino storyline. It seems like a little bit of a holdover from before.
And then Rosa asks about Cruz's feelings for Santana. And Cruz says, that might be something I should be talking to Santana about and not her mother. So it was nice to see Cruz and Rosa have a little scene together. I think they had 1 or 2 words in Spanish to each other, which is nice. Kelly ends up not telling Nick that she slept with Dylan. But Nick feels they had a good talk anyway. He offers to call off the wedding because she needs more space. That everything is great with them now, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, he misunderstands, or perhaps even a bit of wishful thinking at some level, that this entire thing is about her not being quite ready to get married. So I think he feels that he's really gotten to the bottom of it. They've really talked things out, and of course that will prove to not be the case.
Well, I figured, are they going to drag this out some more? Is it going to be May sweeps before he finds out? I thought, maybe Dylan will spill it. But Kelly takes the first opportunity to go to Dylan and say, I didn't tell Nick. So there's not any possibility of a misunderstanding. And Dylan saying, Nick coming up to Dylan and saying, Kelly told me everything. And Dylan goes, oh, you mean that we slept together? So I thought, darn, this is really going to remain a secret. And as soon as Nick starts talking to Dylan, Dylan says, hey, I slept with Kelly. He did not want to drag this out another second and just goes ahead and tells Nick.
Which in many ways is typical jerky Dylan behavior. But I have to admit I was kind of relieved, as I think you were, that it was finally out there. And Kelly's hand has really been forced now.
Nick strides right over to Kelly in Dylan's office and grabs her by the arm and confronts her. So I guess that scene will play out in the next episode.
Yeah.
Now, this was an unexpected turn of events at Buzz's, which makes sense because it's near the water and everyone's got to get on that boat to get to the casino. So it makes sense for people to hang out at this crummy place more often. Mason overhears Warren backing out of taking Julia to the casino opening. And Mason slides on in and offers to go with her. And there's some great dialogue with Julia and Mason in this scene and later on. She kind of insults him a couple of times, and then he says, well, you just have to say no. And she says, that was a maybe.
Yeah, I really liked the interplay of these two characters together because they seem kind of to be equals in a way. And I have to admit, I actually find Mason has more chemistry with folks like Julia, or even Gina, than he actually does with Mary. You know, I find with the Mary and Mason scenes, I'm kind of like, ugh, you know.
Yeah, that's how I felt then, and that's how I felt now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I probably would have been very excited at this Mason-Julia pairing, because I think even back 35 years ago, that was I saw that spark the first time they had a scene together. And they do, you know, she matches his wordplay as well, which, you know, a lot of the other characters just have to sit and take it from Mason because they're not as well read. But Julia came up with several bon mots of her own, so that was great. And she says, you can take me, but only as far as the door, then we'll split up. Cece compliments Mark on his taste in women. And then Mark thanks Cece for his secret donation to the clinic. Don't tell Mary. Mary finds a cardboard cutout of Mason in her bed. And for a second I was confused by Mary's bedroom, and then I remembered she's now living in the guest house. So that was quite funny. She wears the blue dress that Mason bought her to the opening of the casino. And she and Mark are surprised to see Mason walk in with Julia, who Mary kind of tells Mark, she was my sister's lawyer. Or she helped my sister out when she needed a lawyer, something like that.
And I have to say, I thought, you know, because Mary always makes kind of a big show whenever she's with Mason, especially when she's with him and Mark is around, of being quite dismissive of him. I actually thought it was a little tacky of her to wear the dress Mason gave her. Now, I suppose that's probably the only nice dress she has, but, you know, when you're in these situations and he's there and you're kind of giving him, you know, you're kind of casting him in the shadow a bit to be wearing the dress that he spent so much money on is, it just, as I said, seemed a little tacky to me.
And Julia actually says to Mason, oh, that's Mary. I met her once before at your sister's party. She was wearing the exact same dress. In his car afterwards, Mason finds Mary has put the cardboard cutout in his passenger seat. So he pretends to have a romantic evening with his cardboard cutout. Mark kisses Mary, but she pulls back. So I think she's got Mason on her mind, even though she's divested herself of that cardboard cutout. I think Mason might have two women after him at some point, once we dump boring Mark.
Yeah, well, we haven't seen Janice for a while, have we?
Oh, that's true. We've still got Janice, too, who Mason on and off again dates. Rick and Amy are at the casino opening. We saw Amy earlier at Buzz's all dressed up because Buzz wouldn't give her a break between the end of her shift and the time she had to go to the casino. Rick spends a lot of his night in the teller's cage or behind the bar or at the bar. But we see him all over the place, so it looks like he's doing his job. Dylan, finally, giving up on everyone arriving, decides to open the casino by throwing the golden dice. He says, if luck isn't a lady tonight, I hope she at least shows you a good time. Craps. He throws a 2. The worst thing you could throw. So this may be a bad omen for the whole rest of Dylan's casino story.
Yeah, I was thinking that was maybe a bit of foreshadowing. Don't know where it leads yet, but there must be a reason why they would have Dylan throw craps, especially since he has always claimed to be someone who always wins. And, you know, how lucky he is. So
Sam jokes, if any of you breaks the bank, we might have to sell these dice to pay it off. But he says, no, we've got tons of cash. Oh, that might be a bad thing to announce.
Yeah.
Especially as you're 12 miles offshore and there's no police around. I wonder if they got private security on there.
Didn't see any signs of it.
No, they probably, well, Dylan, did the electricals, so he probably decided he didn't need any security either. Augusta glares at Sophia as she arrives. And as Lionel walks in, and Mason says to Julia, Betty makes a beeline right for Sophia, and he was right. Sophia sees him coming, gets up, and grabs Ted and goes off to dance with him, so she doesn't have to talk to Lionel, or definitely risk being seen with Lionel just as Cece walks in. So.
And we do see Warren there, because that was something we wondered about at the beginning of the episode.
Would Warren come back?
Yeah, because he was as we said, he was supposed to take Julia, and then he didn't think he really wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
But he is there, so he must have gotten on a boat fairly soon, either before or after.
I think he's worried there will be a confrontation between Cece and Lionel, and someone's got to step in and pull Lionel off Cece, or vice versa. If things come to blows, I think he figured it's probably safer for his parents if he's actually there.
I was surprised he wasn't covering it for the newspaper, though.
Oh, maybe he is, but he just didn't have a pen in hand. Lionel is playing with cards when Cece arrives. Now, this is a Tuesday episode, so yesterday when we saw Lionel playing with a deck of cards, I wouldn't have seen that originally. I would have heard it on audio. I wouldn't have been aware that Lionel had his own deck of cards. And here, watching it again now, I remember originally thinking this whole card thing didn't quite make sense to me, so I was really paying attention to it. So hopefully it will make more sense when it wraps up tomorrow. But yeah, so we've seen Lionel had some cards that I feel might be marked. We see him playing with a deck of cards that could be official casino-style cards. Since he is a part owner, he could know what the backing was going to be and have a special set of mark cards made up. But he's very specifically playing with a deck of cards when Cece walks in and comes right up to him and challenges him to a game of poker. And so I can only assume that it is Lionel's cards that he had brought with him that are being used, because being outside of the 12-mile limit, there doesn't seem to be a lot of controls on what kind of gambling is going on here. In the real world, those decks would have been swapped out if they'd been out of the hands of a dealer at any point during the thing. But I feel they're using Lionel's cards, and so I think maybe he has an advantage here. Cece pops right down and hands a $200,000 check to Brick to stake his half of the game, and Lionel does the same. And then during the course of the episode, we get the indication from other characters as time goes by that hours and hours have passed, and they've been playing cards against each other one-on-one for hours. And at one point, someone comes to get Dylan to say, their dealer needs to be swapped out. You need to deal. So he ends up going down there to take over the dealing for the two men. And CC decides that enough is enough, and he writes down on a piece of paper 40% of the casino. He puts his entire stake in to the pot. Lionel does the same. And I think, Lionel didn't seem worried. Maybe he's just bluffing. I feel like Lionel is using a marked deck and is going to try. I think he knew Cece would do something like this if he just put himself in a position where he would look like prey to Cece. That's what I think.
That would be so Lionel to
But that's
know
it.
card
I
tricks
can't
and card
remember
games.
how this ends. I can't remember how it turns out. So presumably one of the two men will be edged out of the casino in tomorrow's episode. But I can't remember which one. So this is actually quite great.
Now, if, as we've hypothesized, the casino ends up in a flaming ruin, this may actually be a bit of a loss rather than a win for whoever comes out on top in this game.
As nice as the set decorators have made the casino, it's not as big and grand as the Orient Express. It doesn't look like something that, they think, we got to keep this going for at least till the May sweeps, because we've spent so much on this set, because it kind of looks a bit underwhelming.
I felt the same, and in fact, my first thought when I saw it was that it reminded me a little bit of our visit to the Stardust, which was probably about a year before it was demolished. And so it was really kind of just dragging itself to the finish line at that point, much smaller, much more modest actually than you would assume based on its reputation, and certainly based on the other big grand casinos that are
I was
in
actually
Las
surprised by that you could touch the ceiling at the Stardust, because it's not it wasn't a big giant thing. It was like just, there was a ceiling a couple feet above your head. It was like a one floor thing. I don't know. The rest of it's, I guess, a hotel. But and we had something at the coffee shop there. It was like a little old fashioned coffee shop at the corner.
Yeah, like it, and that reminded me of the kind of very utilitarian little coffee shops they'd have in some of the department stores and that. So, again, not the big grand buffet you usually think of with Las Vegas.
There's not even any indication of a buffet or any kind of food service. Did anyone even come around with drinks during this episode?
You would think that would be really important because people are actually stranded there. So you'd think the food and beverage side of it would be quite important for keeping them there.
And
keeping them going.
Didn't see where the bathrooms might be yet either. But maybe we'll see in coming episodes if the place doesn't burn down. Anyway, that was a Tuesday episode that originally was a Monday episode, probably. So we'll be back after we watch the Wednesday one. Episode 387 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
What are you going to do? Offer him some candy? Or take away his marbles?
No, Pearl. But I would take away your marbles. If you still had them.
Is anyone supposed to sleep in this bag of lumps?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 387 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, February 5th, 1986. On the boat. Yes, suddenly Nick and Kelly are on the boat, and it's morning because it's daylight. Nick accuses Kelly of sleeping with Dylan, and Kelly denies it in her usual roundabout way, but I'm surprised she's still hanging on to that.
Can I just say, and we'll go through it, but there is actually, for me, nothing about this scene that makes any sense.
All right. Are you talking about the thing that happens next, too?
I'm talking about everything that happens between Nick and Kelly this entire episode.
Well, after the usual moving to the different part of the boat, standing next to each other, talking around in circles, Kelly is so offended by Nick's suggestion that she slept with Dylan that she decides to take the dinghy and go, not even wait for him to pull into the harbor, because she's noticed he's taken a bit of a detour. Then for some reason she falls off the boat. I don't know if it was supposed to look like she slipped or anything, but she just looked like she fell backwards into the water. So I thought, okay, she'll just climb into the dinghy because she didn't hit her head on anything. But she's unconscious, and she starts to sink, and Nick dives in after her and can't find her. And then Nick decides to swim back to the boat, maybe to get a better look at her, and suddenly he's got her in his arms and puts her in the dinghy, and I think that he gets back in the boat, calls the Coast Guard, and says to have an ambulance meet them. And then next thing we see, they're in the dinghy on the shore. And he's pulling her out of the dinghy as the ambulances approach.
Yeah, I didn't understand why Nick wasn't going into Santa Barbara Harbor, because that's a big source of consternation at the start of this scene, that he's going in some other direction. I didn't understand why Kelly was denying everything. I didn't understand why she suddenly runs to the back of the boat and jumps in the dinghy, and then I didn't understand her accident at all, because she said it just seemed like she sort of fell in for some reason.
Mm-hmm. And neither the water nor the dinghy looked like they would knock her out, because dinghies are kind of rubbery looking.
Yeah, it was just very strange, Nick not being able to find her, and then calling the Coast Guard, and my expectation was that if she had some sort of injury, the Coast Guard would come and meet them on the boat and, maybe apply assistance there. So I found it quite surprising that he was sort of carrying her onto the shore after calling the Coast Guard as well. So just to me all seemed very weird. But it was very nice to have a scene that was actually outdoors. That was actually one very cool thing about it.
The whole thing was actually outdoors on a boat, and sometimes we could see some of the harbor in the background, and sometimes just the ocean. But it looks like Nick and Kelly got another location scene. Kelly's probably had a good share of the location scenes, the getting murdered by Peter in the wilds of Arizona, and of course the train thing, and then of course early on Peter and Kelly on the boat. That was a lot of location stuff. So Eden wakes up to find Kirk staring at her. Well, she doesn't really notice, but he's been watching her sleep and says, "I love you." They shortly after find out that Cece has not come home. It's morning, as we mentioned, and he's still at the casino. Gina decides once and for all to find out who hired that PI, who is sitting outside her room. So she finds a weapon and opens the window and shouts, "Help, help, my son is ill." When the PI comes running in, Gina smashes him over the head with the chair and searches his pockets and finds a note from the person who hired him, C.C. Capwell. She tells Cruz, and Cruz says that the PI hasn't really done anything illegal, so he can't really do anything about it. So Gina tells him she'll handle it herself. Cece waits for Lionel to respond to his bet of 40% of the casino. He's raised the pot by that much. Lionel calls for breakfast instead. And there's a whole half of the episode involves Lionel trying to get breakfast before the game continues, even though Dylan says it's highly unusual to pause a game in the middle of a hand. So they have to get a guard to guard the table. Kirk and Eden arrive, and Cece asks Kirk's advice on how he should play it. And the guard lets Kirk see Cece's hold card. And Kirk says, "Looks like you got him. You should go for it." Eden and Sophia end up in Dylan's office, where they can keep their eye on the monitors, see what's going on in the main casino, while they chat and they talk about Cruz and Eden and Lionel and Sophia and Cece. And Eden ends up saying to Sophia that she sort of understands a bit better about the decision Sophia had to make way back then. So is this the end of the Sophia-Eden feud?
Could be. We'll see.
Finally, the poker game resumes. Lionel not only puts his 40% up to meet Cece's bet, he raises it, his remaining beachfront property, and insists that Cece put up the property that he and Mason stole from the Lockridges last year. And then Cece raises him the equivalent value of the entire Lockridge Matisse collection. Little does Cece know they're probably fake. And he's not so crass as to put money up against it. He bets 8 of his finest Arabian horses to match the Matisse collection. And Lionel agrees only if Cece throws in the Capwell jet. Mm-hmm. To which Cece replies, "As long as you throw in the Lockridge yacht." Mason suggests Lionel just finish it all by throwing in Sophia. So they've pretty much put a lot of their assets on the table, and Mason whispers to Kirk he must be worried that Cece's gambling away so much of what he's hoping to gain. But Kirk once again insists he married Eden for love and not money. And then Mason starts talking to Kirk about all the little requests that Cece makes of him and little jobs he's doing, like with Gina. He says, that will accelerate, and before you know it, you'll find yourself doing something for him that could end you up in jail. I wonder if that's foreshadowing.
I feel like it could be a bit of foreshadowing. I feel like eventually things between Kirk and Cece are going to sour a little bit in ways that might be quite entertaining.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if Kirk necessarily wants to take on the Lockridges. He hasn't really even met that many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he particularly cares one way or the other about them, but then again, who knows what he might decide to do. Just as the game is about to finish, and we are about to find out who has won everything, Gina barges into the casino and demands to talk to Cece immediately. He blows her off, and instead of waiting patiently in the corner, she throws everything off the table, destroying the game, and Dylan, as the dealer, is forced to declare that game is dead and all the bets are null and void. And now I remember why I was so annoyed by this when I was a kid, because that was not the resolution anyone was hoping for. It was exciting, but when you're given a 50-50 choice and you're rooting for one person to win, you kind of don't want it to be a draw.
And you had all these theories about marked cards and that.
I know, that's probably what made it so annoying too as a kid, that I thought Lionel had some scheme in mind, because the next scene shows that Lionel clearly didn't have a scheme in mind, because Mason and Augusta are under the table and they've scrambled to get the cards for their own purposes to discover who would have won, and they reveal the cards to each other, only to find, as Mason puts it, it was a double bluff.
And I have to say, that little scene with Mason and Augusta under the table, I think that's probably been my favorite moment in this whole show so far. I was quite delighted by that.
That's a taste of some of the wackiness that's starting to be infused into Santa Barbara.
But I have to give it to Gina. She somehow got a boat out there, hauled herself up into the casino, because as we've already stated, oil rigs aren't necessarily as easy to get into as you would think. Managed to get past security, and it doesn't look like Dylan really hired security at all for his casino, because no one tries to stop her at any point during her rampage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she might just think, oh, maybe I'll just grab some chips while everyone's distracted. Santana tells Cruz she's never seen Cece so angry. Eden comes over to them and says she's decided that she's going to have a great marriage with Kirk, and that Santana and Cruz make a good match too, and they should just be friends. So I think this pretty much puts a nail in the coffin for Cruz and Eden, opening everything up for Cruz and Santana. But on the Eden side, she also is trying to make the marriage work. She gives Kirk a ring that's been inscribed, and she performs a little impromptu marriage ceremony for the two of them, just to drive home that she really is wholeheartedly throwing herself into this marriage. And they end up kissing, as far as I recall.
On the Cruz and Santana side, Santana seems to welcome this, détente, with relief and warmth. I felt Cruz was a bit more tentative, which makes sense because, depending on the relationship, not everyone necessarily wants to be friends with their ex afterwards. And I think it's still quite uncomfortable for him.
And I think he's still hoping a bomb's going to drop when he figures out what the secret of the dress is. So there's no point in cleaning up after a bomb that hasn't gone off yet. Santana and Cruz go home, and as usual, the phone rings. Cruz picks it up, and he finds out that Kelly has nearly drowned and rushes out. I think Santana does go with him, though. Mm-hmm. So. Dylan gets a call to find out that Kelly's in the hospital. So, of course, he'll be racing over there, and Nick will be so happy to see him barge into Kelly's hospital room. Mm-hmm. Cece is, of course, livid with Gina. He orders Gina to come to the house at 10 p.m. tonight and bring Brandon. Now, Gina's not as quaking in her boots as she should be, just from this. She mentions to Kirk, I'm going to pop by the house later. And Kirk says, what for? So he can hang you? You have blown it all. Gina really has no clue as to the immensity of what she just did. And no one really ever explains it to her.
No. And it seemed to me that this marks a bit of a change in her relationship with Kirk as well.
Yes. Because Gina calls Kirk to find out what Cece has plan for her. And now Cece has told Kirk he's going to take everything away from Gina. But when Gina calls, Kirk says, no, no idea what he's got planned. Come on over.
And it was, it was interesting, as you say, Gina seems quite clueless. And she even sort of says to Kirk, well, you better find out for me. Like, she doesn't realize that this has kind of shifted things a lot in terms of the power she has.
I think it's going to be so severe that even if Gina tries shouting on her way out, oh, Kirk knew all the time, even didn't pull the plug, it's just going to fall on deaf ears because she's going to be ushered out of the building so quickly. When Gina arrives, Rosa is very happy to see Brandon. And Gina goes to meet Cece in the living room, still not really as frightened as she should be. And Cece hands her a letter and tells her to sign it. And as she reads the several-page legal document, she is horrified by what it contains. I think we can all guess the general gist of it, but it's got to be even worse than the current exile. Presumably, it will be that Brandon's being given to Santana, or maybe Cece will take him. I don't know if he still doesn't think he should be with Santana, so I wouldn't be surprised if Cece says, yeah, I'll raise Brandon, that's fine, as long as I can put the screws to Gina, that'll be fine.
It'll be interesting to see if it's, worse than what he's threatened Mason with, because he threatened Mason with a lot, and obviously removed him from the company, I guess, and, all the sort of power he was amassing while Cece was in the coma, but I don't think he's actually taken a lot of concrete action against Mason beyond what he had already done before. So it'll be interesting to see just what extent he punishes Gina and what that looks like.
And if there's some way for Gina to come back from that, or if it's going to, change her life completely. Well, we had credits at the end of this episode. They were exactly the same as the last ones in episode 383, which is only 4 episodes ago. The same normal main cast, and then the add-ons were Brandon Capwell as by Brandon Call and Private Eye Joe George. Same 2 people we had last time. And that's it for a Wednesday episode that was probably originally a Tuesday episode. We'll be back after we watch episode 388, and we have a little surprise coming up in the next episode. So, we'll see you then. Oh, I should ask you, maybe, before we go. Who do you think the next character will be to leave the show?
Next character to leave the show. I'm trying to think who we haven't really seen very much of lately. Problem is, once we lose track of these characters, I forget about them too, so I don't know. I have no idea.
What about the next original character to leave the show? I'm going back as far as Lionel joining the show as being original.
I feel like Lionel's not leaving the show.
No, but anyone who joined, since the beginning.
Well, the character.
Character or actor? I guess both, really.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. Character, actor. And who do you think will be the next person to die?
Well, we all hope it'll be Dylan, of course.
Hope for Dylan.
That's obvious.
So you have no idea which actor or character will be?
No, I really don't.
Because the Capwells have pretty much had their shakeups in this last few months.
I mean, we have not seen Laken for an awfully long time, so I'm assuming the character will come back. We already know the original actress isn't coming back. Warren hasn't had a lot to do for a while, but I think he will. I think that character will remain even if the actor, changes up at some point.
So, would you say John Allen Nelson then for the next actor to leave?
Maybe, or it could be one of the many Santanas. You were chatting yesterday about the next Santana, so That might be a clue that the next one's coming up, if that was on the top of your mind.
All right.
It's more me reading you than
I'll give you
the
John L.
series.
Nelson and Gina Gallego as the next actor to leave, and next character, no idea. Because, I mean, yeah.
Well, again,
character-wise,
my
character-wise, if they come back, they're not really going.
my hope would be character-wise that Dylan would leave, but he has not been on that long. No, it won't be him. Yeah, I'd have to... I don't know.
All right. We will be back after we watch episode 388. See you then.
Bye-bye.
He even asked me to come over to the house later this morning and bring Brandon.
What for? The hanging? You are history, lady. Because you have blown it all.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 388 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, February 6th, 1986. And we spent a little time in the Capwell living room in this episode, and I feel like they've jazzed it up a little bit. I guess maybe to match, the new dining room that they had a few weeks ago. I think they've maybe opened it up a bit more and put some more ornate stuff, and there's tons of more paintings on the walls, as far as I'm aware.
I feel like they must have gotten a little bit of infusion of money at some point before this maybe before the new year, because we've seen this wonderful new dining room. As you say, they seem to have jazzed up some of their existing sets a little bit. Of course, we have the new casino set, and we are still getting some outdoor on location shots.
Well, it's February sweeps, so maybe they got a bit of money for that. In the real world, we did watch The Crew, which was a sitcom Lane Davies was in the 90s, and I remember at the time that it originally aired not watching it because, it's pretty obvious from rewatching the pilot. It's very boring, not funny, and Lane Davies was barely in it. That's probably why I never watched more than one episode the first time around.
I suspect he's probably rather glad he's barely in it, because it's not really very good.
And I don't remember, did we mention that we saw Mary in Righteous Gemstones? As the, I believe, mother of the guy who's married to the daughter on Righteous Gemstones. So I don't know if we remember to mention that. And was that it for sightings?
I think so. I mean, I think we had seen someone on Lou Grant fairly recently, but we had already discussed that.
We
That
talked
was
about Amy. Yeah. I think we're caught up to date on sightings. Janice finds Mason sleeping on her couch. Really, it's Sally's couch.
So we get to see Janice again.
Yeah, so she's still around. Mason was driving home early in the morning from the casino and was too tired, so he pulled over. So I found myself on your street. He, of course, is still with his cutout, so he's actually sleeping on the couch with the cutout. Mason asks Janice to join him in the shower, but she says she prefers to just hang out here with the cutout. Dylan shows up to tell Janice about Kelly being in the hospital and that after today she's going to end up with the right man. And Mason comes out of the shower just at this point and questions him as to what exactly he's talking about. I think he knows he's talking about Kelly, but pretty sure he doesn't feel Dylan is the right man for Kelly. Though she did tell him she was impressed. Remember that one time? She said he was impressed with Dylan, but I don't know. I think maybe he's heard some stories since then.
I just find it so hard to believe anyone would be impressed with Dylan, but I suppose he does. I mean, even with CC, he does sort of appeal to his more roguish side as well, perhaps.
CC tells Gina to sign the paper that will end their marriage and hand over custody of Brandon to CC. Gina, of course, does not want to, but he says, well, then I'll have you arrested for stabbing me with that needle. And I guess, long story short, she signs the paper. And later when Mason asks her why she signed it, of course, she cannot reveal the reason. Gina tries to stab Cece with the letter opener, but he grabs it from her and says, oh, it's very unwise of you to hand me a weapon. She tries to get Mason to help her, but he won't. So she ends up stabbing a kitchen knife through the heart of the cutout. She says goodbye to Brandon, but of course can't tell him why, and Brandon doesn't want her to go. So Brandon's very upset by the whole thing of suddenly Gina being forced to leave him there at the Capwells. Rosa tells Brandon that it's because Gina is sick again, which is what Cece had told her to tell Brandon.
I feel like we're sort of seeing a lot of the same plot lines kind of recycled a few times over, where, the Cece getting her to sign papers that will take away her rights to Brandon is very, very similar to what Mason was doing just a few months ago. Same thing. And, of course, as we've already talked about, despite all the animosity, everyone always comes running to Mason when they need a lawyer. So we see that again, too.
I feel like we've reached sort of a pinnacle of the taking Brandon away from Gina. But then again, who knows? Who knows what could happen? Gina tries to get Lionel to help, but he won't help. She says, "Oh, it's because Brandon's not your real grandson now." But he basically says there's nothing he can do. Cece's the boy's adopted father. Then Augusta tries to actually see why Gina is so upset, but Gina runs out before Augusta can talk to her. So then Gina is angry with Kirk for not helping her out in this, and she is so upset that she picks up the phone and says she's going to tell Eden everything. And Kirk grabs the phone from her and grabs her arms, tells her that would be a big mistake. So, at the end of the episode, Gina ends up rooting through her purse and finding presumably the rest of the pills that she had originally used to poison Eden, and she takes a handful of them and decides no, she's not going to let Cece win. This is interesting because you might have thought, oh, could this be the end of the Gina character? Is she going to take all those pills and that'll be the end to her rather long arc? But she decides against it, and then there's a knock on the door. And she opens it, and there's a girl in her, I would say, late teens, early 20s, who says, "Hi, Aunt Gina, it's me, Haley." And I think a new path for Gina has opened itself up with this unexpected arrival of a relative that we never knew about. We kind of got the idea just from the way she and Summer were on their own after they, I think they said their parents died, but I don't know if they actually said that.
I definitely got that impression that the parents had died.
But Haley, being that old, obviously is too old to have been Summer's daughter, so perhaps there is a much older sibling that, just was not there anymore in the picture when the parents vanished, and wasn't an option for her and Summer to go live with them. Or maybe it was one of those things like the Bassetts, and then their older sibling had just left the house years ago in disgust and cut all ties with the parents. Maybe when Summer and Gina were still kids, and they never actually knew that sibling.
A step sibling, perhaps, as well.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting. I remembered that Haley was coming around this time, and I remembered that Gina was her aunt, but really I cannot recall the exact relationship. So that'll be presumably explained in the very next episode. So I'm kind of excited to see that. And I thought to myself, if I were Gina and I had just lost Brandon, and this 18-year-old showed up on my door, the first thing I'd do is say, okay, you got to get yourself a job at the Capwell house as Brandon's governess. And while you're at it, make Ted fall in love with you, because then I can have my revenge against him when you dump him. So these are the first two thoughts I had. What can Gina do with this new ally who's a relative and presumably won't be scared off quite as easily as other previous partners in crime have been?
Yeah, I didn't think that far ahead with what Gina might do with this character. My first thoughts were she does with her appearance and the way she's dressed, and that sort of echo Summer a little bit. So I wondered if that would be commented on at all. We haven't really seen this new version of Gina talk about Summer at all. So I I'm interested to hear if her name is even mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also wondering if having this relative here, now we don't really know what she's like at all. So she might be just as scheming
All we know is how
and
she's
miserable
dressed.
as...
She seems kind of farm girl looking.
Yeah. So we don't know. I mean, she might be as scheming and miserable as Gina is. But maybe she's more of an innocent, and it would be interesting to see if she brings out the same side of Gina as Summer did. So that's something I'm kind of looking for too.
I mean,
especially in this new iteration of Gina.
Although she has just threatened to take down the entire Capwell family, so she might not be tempered quite so soon. But we'll see. It will ground her a bit, and actually keep her from maybe doing something rash too. But definitely, from her age and gender, she is a potential love interest for Ted. So,
and for Warren, who is never
that's
lucky in love.
That's true. Yeah. And possibly Danny. So we've got 3 potential. Assuming she likes guys, we've got 3 potential suitors for her.
Oh, it would be fun if Ted and Warren fought over her this time.
Mm.
Both something to do, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah. Ted, Cruz, Santana, Sophia, and Lionel all arrive at the hospital. Dylan, of course, is already there and accuses Nick of pushing Kelly off the boat. Now, Dylan's gone totally off the rails in this episode with accusing Nick of purposely hurting Kelly. The doctor tells Cruz about Kelly's injuries, and clearly he's concerned about it. I think we all assume she hit her head when she fell. So, but the injuries are of such a type that Cruz has to ask Nick if he hit Kelly. And, of course, Nick says that's insane. Cece arrives and immediately tells Sophia to leave. But eventually they end up sitting together in the waiting room, waiting for news. And Sophia starts to recall a time when young Kelly had gone tobogganing and slammed into a tree, which is funny because we just saw some footage from the early 1900s in a movie we saw about Dawson City that had some kids slamming into trees and toboggans. Cece ends up telling her that he appreciates the children she gave him. She says, "I didn't give them to you, they're still mine too." Santana asks Cece, "Oh, what are your plans for Brandon?" He says he's focused on Kelly right now, but we know that he really already has planned not to let Santana have the...
And Cruz does warn her that she is getting her hopes up and moving far too quickly in her assumptions on that.
Santana says to Cruz that she's convinced that Cece is going to give her Brandon, and he's going to do the right thing for Brandon. And Cece says, well, he'll do it. Or Cruz says, he'll do what he thinks is right for Brandon. So.
I have to admit that, every time there's some kind of tragedy or miracle, in the case of Cece coming out of his coma, and Santana always seems to burst in the middle of it and ask about the status of Brandon. And I always think that she could benefit and perhaps even get custody of Brandon by this time if she read the room a little better. And, maybe she needs to be a little more strategic in her thinking, whereas Gina, of course, needs to be far less scheming.
She should touch base with Julia a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing to remind everyone is that Brandon still does not know that Santana is his birth mother. Even though he was insulting Nick the entire episode and accusing him, Dylan ends up bringing him some dry clothes because he is still wearing the wet clothes from the early morning rescue. And they end up sitting together in the waiting room, waiting to hear how Kelly is. Now, I believe Kelly did actually get out of surgery at one point, and they're just waiting for her to recover.
And we really go through, a whole spectrum here with Nick, and there is a point near the beginning when Kelly's brought in, and Ted's sort of the first one who really follows this line of thought that Nick might be responsible for her injuries. And, of course, that kind of reaches almost a climax, as you said, when the doctor voices some suspicion of how she got the bump on her head and actually talks privately to Cruz about it.
Now, if Kelly doesn't regain consciousness, I wonder if there'll be some sort of thing where they think Nick did it on purpose and he ends up getting
That
arrested.
occurred to me. But, by the end of the episode, everyone is treating Nick as a hero.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it the whole episode goes through this weird little arc.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see if that's followed up. What kind of condition Kelly's in. Maybe she'll get amnesia again, Who knows?
Yeah. She may be prone to it now, just like Eden's prone to being hypnotized now.
And maybe that will also affect the fate of her relationship with the brothers Hartley.
Mm-hmm. Lionel finds Augusta at the casino, and she wants to talk about the settlement for the divorce. And she says she's decided she'll just take all the art and he can have all the real estate. And he says, that art collection was built by me and my mother and my grandfather. You take the real estate. And so what do I want? Some dusty old land. It's interesting because, as we recall, her parents were land
in
frauds.
real estate, yeah.
So, that is it for the episode. So really, the only scene at the casino was Augusta and Lionel, and Gina had to go all the way to the casino to burst in on there to find Lionel, and then all the way back to burst in on Kirk. So, only noteworthy things are in the credits are that the piano is furnished by Schaefer and Sons. I think there must be a piano in that living room, but I never actually see it.
Or there would be a piano, I guess, in the casino.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. They do, yeah.
I
Because
think
they had
we
a pianist the
saw
other day.
Sam performing on piano or something.
They had a different guy actually playing
Yeah.
for the opening. But yeah, so maybe that's where the piano is. That's they have like 2 tables and a bar and a piano in that casino. And I saw the name Victoria Lane zoom by in the credits. And that is a crew member who I believe passes away early on, and they end up naming a character after her later. That's the story anyway, although seems to be some discussion on Facebook as to whether that's accurate. But definitely there is a character called Victoria Lane coming up soon. And we had, I guess, an NBC VHS copy of the episode because the NBC announcer said, will Renko become the boss of the Hill tonight on NBC?
And of course, we've been watching Hill Street Blues as well.
Every Thursday, we watch a Hill Street Blues and a Knots Landing to simulate 1981, I believe, is the year we're currently in. So that's several years ahead of this Hill Street. That's probably the final season of Hill Street Blues by now. That is about it. So we'll see you for a Friday episode. That was probably originally a Thursday. But things are zipping along, and I'm excited to hear more about Haley. That's the thing I'm most interested in right now. I doubt Santana's going to be handed Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see you after we watch episode 389. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We have finished episode 389 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, February 7th, 1986. Dylan shows up with a bouquet of flowers for Kelly. Nick rolls his eyes. Dylan mentions that he and Kelly were lovers in Santa Rosa. Cruz has to stop Nick from attacking Dylan. Nick says he's going to kill Dylan. Now, this is a soap opera phrase that usually gets my spidey senses going, because if people start threatening to kill other people, that sometimes means there's a murder mystery building. So I don't know if that's the intention here, or if that's just a turn of phrase that Nick has taken to saying lately.
Well, it would be nice if it is an indication that Dylan's about to become a murder victim. We'll take that in lieu of him burning alive on the casino. But whatever way he goes out, we'll take it.
Nick decides not to believe anything Dilly says until he can hear it from Kelly. Kirk is annoyed that Cece is watching him like a hawk. But Eden says, well, he needs to get to know you. And then Cece tells Kirk that his first grandson will have double the trust fund of all his other grandchildren. And Kirk says, isn't that a bit sexist? And Cece says, I think it is. Kirk tries to get Eden to have a baby on the spot by tempting her with an old doll from the attic. But she wants to focus on her career. Later, Eden tells Cruz that she and Kirk are considering having a baby. So she's trying to nail that coffin lid down on their relationship with saying things like this to Cruz. Of course, she secretly writes him another letter later, telling him that she really doesn't want to have a baby with Kirk. She wants to have one with Cruz.
And I feel like her habit of journaling her emotions and feelings is going to ricochet back on her, because I'm pretty sure at some point Kirk is going to find this, and it's going to be even more fuel for him.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Kirk would do if he found those letters?
I think he would start seriously scheming to get Cruz out of the picture, however he could. And there could be. We'll just have to see what the circumstances are. But I think it would definitely make him want to put as much between Eden and Cruz as he possibly could.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if he might try to help push Santana and Cruz together. Santana might need an ally on the inside. This might be something that will help Kirk.
Yeah.
Finally, Eden meets with Cruz to discuss the evidence, and he shows her the dress. And she, of course, doesn't want to talk about it. She says, I tried to kill my father. And he says, no, you didn't. And she runs away. So I don't know if that scene will be continued, because that was just the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Or if this is now going to be it for a few weeks as we wait for the next thing to happen in this storyline. Haley reveals to us that she is the daughter of Gina's brother, Stan. Stan Blake, I guess. Who died last month, so no Stan Blake for us. Mm-hmm. So I guess he was an older, estranged brother of the family, mm-hmm. Or maybe just living far away. She kind of has a country girl vibe to her. Maybe they're just living in another state,
Mm-hmm. Well, she mentions Atlantic City again.
Did she?
Come all the way out from Atlantic City. So Atlantic
okay.
City seems to be a bit of a theme in Gina's life. I wouldn't, having been to Atlantic City, I wouldn't have necessarily said it would have that almost country girl vibe that we're getting off of Haley.
Maybe it's just that one dress they've chosen to put her in for her first episode. Gina, of course, is about to slam the door in her face, which is interesting. She doesn't have anyone after Summer's gone. But Haley says, I don't really have anything except, the inheritance that I brought with me in cash. Gina discovers Haley has $5,000 in cash in her purse. Immediately suggests it would be better off in the bank, but being only 18, Haley probably can't get a bank account on her own, so it might be better if Gina just put the money in her account. She takes the money out of Haley's purse and leaves. Next thing we see her, she's ordering a new cocktail dress for $500 from her favorite clothier. I don't know how long Haley's inheritance is going to last.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed. We didn't hear anything about Summer, so I sort of feel like maybe the show has completely dropped that. But to me, that was really unfortunate, because Summer had always brought out another side of Gina, much as Brandon does. And I think, especially with this more aggressive version of Gina, that would have been kind of a nice note to have been able to sound on. That would kind of give the character a bit more depth. So I was disappointed about that. And all of these potential things that we were thinking could happen between Gina and Haley, some of them very strategic, you were thinking, that one could still come to pass. But right now Gina is just sort of in a gimme mode. Mm-hmm. And I think while that is really consistent with how the character is right now, I actually don't find that as compelling as if she had more complicated layers.
It's unfortunate seeing, the character meet a relative they haven't met since they were tiny, and that we didn't think had any relatives for the last 2 years. You kind of are expecting them to have a chat about various relatives and, who moved when and why, just because that's what people do when they meet lost relatives, really.
Yeah.
So that's a bit unfortunate.
I thought this was a bit of a throwaway opportunity, actually. I think this could have, as I say, kind of broadened the character of Gina out a little bit more. And I think the actress would be capable of playing that. I would like to see this version of Gina play that out a bit more. And I just think it would have made actually Gina's storyline much more interesting than this sort of revenge thing she's got going right now.
Haley tells Gina that her mom always said that Gina was the only success in the family, which actually does brighten Gina up. Which says, yeah, you married into that rich family. And Gina, that's right, I am the success of the family.
Well, she's married rich twice now, so she actually really is.
So, maybe Haley will be needing that job as Brandon's nanny sooner than later. Gina stops by Santana's, assuming that she has Brandon. Actually, I think it's at the beach house. She does not. But Gina's annoyed that Santana is baking a welcome home cake for Brandon and throws it to the floor. As if, Gina needed to give Santana more reasons to hate her.
This Gina throws things a lot. We've seen her throw over a poker table and cake just in 2 episodes.
Gina stops by the Orient Express to taunt CC with her new cocktail dress. Seems to be the main reason, but she does actually decide to give a little impassioned speech for not giving Brandon to Santana. Santana shows up with her much anticipated meeting with Cece, and Cece says, "You can have Brandon," much to everyone's shock. Once you're married. That is his only stipulation. Santana is incensed at the thought of this being forced upon her. Cece says, "I can't let him out of my custody unless I know you have a stable family for him." I think Cece is doing this for Eden, but he's cleverly not mentioned Cruz in any way. He's just said, "Oh, you just need to be married." Totally sticking with this story that's what he's doing it because he wants Brandon to have a stable family. But really, I think it's just a scheme to force Cruz and Santana to get married so that Eden will have one more block between her and Cruz. I think Cece really deadpans his way through his explanation of why, and does a really good job of underplaying the subtext there of what his real plan is. Santana freaks out at the Orient Express and inadvertently knocks over the table, but dishes go bumping, and someone has to drag her out as she's screaming, "I want my son!" So it's interesting that even though Santana has previously thought about marrying Cruz, that this, when SCC was saying it to her, I said to Diane, "Oh, looks like everyone will be happy with this arrangement." But I was shocked when Santana was against it.
I think it was perhaps more the principle of the thing than the having to marry someone, especially Cruz, because we seem to see a lot of chemistry between her.
But that it escalated to her screaming and having to be dragged out when it really does kind of match with her plans. So, and that was it for the episode. It was very Gina-based. So, and very CC grandson-based. Now, I was trying to think ahead of who actually does have CC's first grandchild. I don't think it was Eden and Kirk. That's a bit of a twist to the story of CC's first grandchild. So I think it'll be a couple of years before we meet a new Channing. That is it. For Friday, and that means it's week 80 is over. And that was probably originally a Thursday episode. So we should have a corker of a Monday coming up, which we'll be watching later. And we will podcast about either after that or in the morning.
Well, I guess in some ways, if you think about Channing, the one who died, and how that should have been Brick. I mean, Brick has adopted Amy's baby, so...
I don't know if Cece will consider Lionel's...
No, I don't think he would. And it's not a blood relative in either generation.
Mm-hmm.
But...
although I don't know what the legalities are if you adopt a baby that's been swapped with a different baby. Whose baby are you the parent of? I mean, Cece's on the birth certificate of Barnaby Wallace, who we know as Brick, as being his father, which makes him legally his father. The fact that they were switched actually doesn't even enter into it. They've just been going by the wrong names all these years. So, legally, he is Brick's father.
Interesting. Well, we haven't seen much of Brick lately or seen where that storyline is headed. But, I kind of feel like maybe Brick is being a little bit smart right now to just keep out of everything and let things play out in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Keaton's going to go along with the baby idea anytime soon?
With Kirk? No. She might make noises about it to Cruz. I think it's partly to, as you say, to put a nail in the coffin of their relationship. Mm-hmm. I think on one level it definitely is. But I think on another level, I almost feel like perhaps she's testing Cruz a little bit. I don't know.
Or maybe she knows that she's not going to be with Kirk forever. Why have a kid with him? I mean, even if she's trying to make it work now, mm-hmm. I mean, how many years really will that go before it all falls apart? She must know that.
Well, and also, she's well aware of her dad's sexist attitudes. Right now he has put trust in Eden, but they've definitely had their clashes, and he's mm-hmm. definitely limited her growth in the company because she is a woman. She's also seeing how he's wrestling with Gina over control of Brandon. Does she necessarily want Cece to be wrestling with control over her son? Does she, if she has a son? Even if they're on good terms, she may have ideas about how she wants to raise him. And does she necessarily want to see him push her son the way he did push Channing Capwell Jr. Mm-hmm. in this very single-minded pursuit to have this heir to take over the company? I mean, she may realize she's been on the inside of this family for a long time. She may realize that is not necessarily the healthiest thing for someone.
Whereas that's exactly what Kirk wants, because then he'll have a blood link to the Capwells through his son.
Yeah.
And, a lifetime gravy train no matter what happens with Eden, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Much like the way Gina used Brandon.
Yeah.
So, well, we will see you in week 81. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope that's an hallucination because of lack of sleep.